Good morning, everybody. It's great to have a chat yesterday with Pete and Becca and Millbilly. And I did a start of a video about Robert Herman's claim that Mr. Avery will spend the rest of his life in prison. But here's some other stuff that I've been researching. And for a lot of us, when we watched Making a Murderer, to quote Luke Berg, it strained incredulity to see what was happening to Stephen Avery and then to Brendan Dassey. And when we try and explain briefly to people about this case, at times it seems almost comical, laughable that these things should happen. And yes, the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department should be the laughing stock of American police sheriff's departments, but it's not funny. It's very, very, very serious. And one of the things that we often say, don't we, when we see what happened to Stephen Brendan is, thank goodness we don't live in America. Thank goodness that sort of thing doesn't happen here. Since Making a Murderer came out, how many documentaries have you seen that expose incredible cruelty? Probably, obviously Central Park 5, but I would say the Kalief Browder story was a terrible, terrible example of the cruelty of the system, but plenty of others, of course. All the ones that we've watched. I mean, I've got a list of about 25, 26 documentaries that expose just how bad things can be. And as I say, we often, don't we say, well, thank goodness that sort of stuff wouldn't happen here. Maybe slightly prematurely, given the fact that Luke Mitchell is still locked up for the murder of Jody Jones, which is clearly an unsustainable decision. So yeah, wrongful convictions can happen anywhere, but as we know, they've got a national registry of wrongful convictions since 1989, and it's up to 2,800 people, including people put to death and then exonerated. Another thing that we often hear, isn't it? Steve Drizzen, in doing his presentations around the world, he's had serving police officers come up to him and say, if I had done what Wiegert and Fassbender did to Brendan, I would be sacked. I would not be given an award, an investigative award. I would have been sacked for what they did. So anyway, I came across this article. It's something that's always concerned me about America. Why is it the way it is? There's some great people there. Let me get this straight. I'm not having to go at Americans. It's America, the system, of which a lot of Americans are not happy. And we've seen recently, haven't we, because of things like the presidential election, the sort of divisions that have become huge in society. But when it comes to cruelty, you've only got to look at the way that Jean Couchet and Thomas Kasurik decided to pursue Stephen Avery following the Sandy Morris incident. They weren't content that he would be getting justifiably 6 years for that. He did 6 years for that, justifiably. What he did was ridiculous. To run her off the road and point a gun at her. but to deliberately go after him the way they did. Excuse me one moment, I'm just going to shut the door. The wife's put the washing machine on, bless her. Sorry about that. Even with the headphones on, it was drowning me out. Not a bad thing, some of you might say, but anyway. Yeah, the incredible cruelty of the system. All about class. You know, the Averys, they live on a salvage yard in trailers. You know, we're the police, we're the cops, we've got the big careers, and you know, we're gonna do whatever we want. So first of all, I wanted to share, I've got a few things I want to share, but first of all, this one. And this is an article by Umar Haq, Why America is the World's Most Uniquely Cruel Society. How punching down became a way of life in America. In actual fact, just one moment, there was something else I just wanted to quickly share with you. Another thing I just wanted to go for. Somewhere here. Yeah, let's do that now. This is the mortality rate in America, homicides. Number of deaths per year, 19,141. I've done the math, you divide that by 365, you get 52.44. 52.5 people killed by homicide every day. Deaths per year, 19,141, of which firearms deaths, 14,414. Anyway, let's get back to that other article that I wanted to share with you. Let's just call that one up again. Okie dokie. How punching down became a way of life in America. And I thought this was quite an interesting article. In this essay, I want to share with you a tiny theory of what it means to be American. It is up to you to judge, as ever, whether it carries any weight. All that I will say is that when I look around, it explains a little what I see. Any theory of being American must explain one salient and striking fact: cruelty. America is the most cruel nation among its peers, even among the most poor countries today. It is something like a new Rome. It has little, if any, functioning healthcare, education, transport, media, no safety nets, no stability, security. The middle class is collapsing and life expectancy is falling. Young people die for a lack of insulin they cannot crowdfund. Elderly, middle-class people live and die in their cars. Kids massacre each other in schools when they're not self-medicating the pain of it all away. The combination of these pathologies happens nowhere else, not a single place in the world, not even Pakistan, Costa Rica, or Rwanda. Hence, the world is aghast daily at the depths of American cruelty, yet somehow they seem bottomless. Of course, I don't mean that all Americans are cruel. I just mean that in the same way we say countries, institutions, cultures have attitudes and dispositions, that there's such a thing as a French or German national attitude or disposition, so too there is an American one. Nor do I mean America is, quote, the most cruel society in the world. Can we really ever judge that? But it is uniquely cruel, a kind of special example in weird, needless and singular ways. Let me throw that into relief. Scandinavians are the happiest, longest lived and most prosperous people in the world because they do not punish one another constantly, but lift one another up. But Americans do not believe this reality. The underlying sentiment that unites America's manifold problems is a myth of cruelty. So where did the myth of cruelty come from? That is the question before us, if we really want to understand America. I've wondered since I was a kid, to be honest. I thought once it was about capitalism, patriarchy, race, once. But now I think that while those are expressions of it, that something more primary, fundamental and unique happened. America was a strange, improbable combination of things singular in history. A promised land, but one for the despised, waves upon waves of them washed up on its shores. First, the Puritans, mocked and loathed in England, then peasants and farmers and outlaws from across Europe, then Chinese, Japanese, Latinos, and today Muslims. These immigrants all tended to share a common trait. They were at the very bottom, the lowest rung of social and economic hierarchies in their own countries, all of them. That has changed a little recently, but America was founded by and for the despised, loathed, hated, people referred to as trash, nobodies, serfs, exiles, outcasts, who were never given an ounce of respect, dignity, or even belonging in their societies of origin. Let me make that clearer. We did not see nobles and landed gentry emigrate to America, British lords and German counts and Italian barons. We saw German peasants, Irish villagers, Swedish farmers, and dwellers of Italian slums. My own family history is that my descendants, going back 4 generations, were on their way to America for a better life when they got as far as the UK and decided to stay, or simply didn't have enough money to get on the next boat to America. Why? Because life in southern Italy at that time, at the turn of the 1900s, was terrible for them. People from the very lowest of hierarchies elsewhere, the oppressed and the subjugated, came to this promised land. So first the English and French settlers supposed that this new world was theirs and began a genocide against its natives, of course. But it wasn't just the natives that they came to hate for threatening their natural right to this promised land. It was the next waves of settlers too. The English settlers hated the French hated the Germans, they all hated the Irish hated the Italians, and so on. That much is historical fact. Do you see the pattern forming yet? This is very abstract, so let me make it concrete. Here came one wave of settlers, English. They dominated their way to the top of a hierarchy above natives and blacks. Then came a new wave, German. They were punched down too and began punching down to bitterly establish themselves in this hierarchy as high up as they could. Then another wave, Irish, punching down, all desperately vying for relative dominance amongst the rest. You see, the crucial fact is that this didn't happen elsewhere in the world. Waves of settlers, all desperately trying to establish themselves above the next, last, most recent in a hierarchy, all the more so because they were despised at the bottom to begin with. In Europe, Asia, South America, hierarchies were long established and broken only by revolution. America was the only nation where this constant reconstruction of hierarchy happened to such a degree over and over again. Hence, the establishment of cruelty as a way of life. How else but to establish one's self above the next wave of migrants? Each new tribe that came to this promised land brought the burden of being despised, subjugated, oppressed with them. They were finally above someone else in a social hierarchy. They were not at the bottom anymore, but to be above requires someone else to be below. And so there was a constant battle for relative position within a growing hierarchy. Hence, dominance, competition, conquest soon became the prized cultural values, norms, and institutional goals. Cruelty as a way of life was born. When we noted that the despised of England hated the newly arrived despised of France, hated the newly arrived despised of Germany, and so on, not to mention natives, blacks, and Asians, in an endless vicious circle, we are also saying America was learning to be cruel by forever constructing greater hierarchies to seize the fruits of a promised land. But greater hierarchies require greater cruelty to climb up to. And the irony is that all this is what the despised came to America to escape. I'll add a peripheral point. The despised, when coming to a promised land, are at least likely, perversely, though we might not immediately think so, to want to share it because they, at last, have something that they feel is theirs. Today's servants want to be tomorrow's masters. Today's peasant wants to be tomorrow's landlord. Today's victim aspires to be tomorrow's oppressor. Now, what was really happening here? In more modern terms, people were learning to punch down, as we might put it today. Americans were being taught to take out their anger, rage, and fear on those less powerful than them. Usually the most obvious and immediate ones they could find. The Irish moved into the neighborhood. Get them. No Chinamen allowed. Those Italians, we've got to move them out of our city. In turn, those Japanese. Punching down began to be institutionalized and normalized. Cruelty was becoming a way of life and a norm. Tribe after tribe of the despised fled to a promised land, but each one demanded their position above the last, having never had anything before. People who had been hated and outcast had status and belonging at last, but only by punching down the next wave. So no mechanisms ever really developed to allow the promised land to be shared wisely, well, or reasonably. Might became right. Now, American leaders try to intervene every now and then. FDR's Second Bill of Rights, JFK's vision for a fairer society, and so on. But they were not very successful because they were fighting a history of cruelty that they did not really understand, one that went to the heart of what it means to be American itself. So they never really said, wait, what do we all really have in common, us Americans? We are the despised and mocked of history, its outcasts and its exiles. This is what unites us. Let us stop punching down then. Otherwise, what have we really learned? We are only repeating the very history of cruelty that we tried to escape from. How sad, how funny. Americans came to a promised land, but they could not escape themselves. Each new wave, trying to rise above the next, built a world even more cruel than the old one, punching down, 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 endlessly. So today, here we are. Punching down has become a national institution, a norm and a way of life. School shootings. Can't ban guns. Let the kids have active shooter drills. We are punching all the way down to our little 5-year-olds. Life expectancy falling. Can't have health care. Let them self-medicate with opioids. We are punching down to the poorest. Education cost a fortune. Too bad. Take out debt. We are punching down to our young people. I could give you endless examples, but perhaps you get the point by now. What does it mean to be American? To really be, see, feel, think, act American? So much so that you are not self-aware of it because it is unconscious, reflexive, invisible, this way of being. Well, it means what it always has, punching down, not lifting up. Punching down is hardwired into America by now, thanks to a unique history of settlers who had never had any. Punching the next wave down for relative hierarchical position, an attitude of cruelty was born. And so today cruelty is the point of its institutions, the purpose of its norms, and the linchpin of its perverse idea of virtue, that by punishing people, we can better them. It is all that Americans expect from each other and give to each other. That is the terrible burden of a promised land that history's despised, warred among one another for domination of. Was it just over 2 million people incarcerated in America? The problem is this: a society of people punching one another down must collapse. What else could it do? It cannot rise, can it? If I am punching you down and I am punching the next person down below me, how can anyone ever lift anyone up? But without lifting one another up, a society cannot grow in quantity or quality of life. This too is what happened to Soviet Russia. America has never reckoned with its history of cruelty. Instead, it developed a defensive mythology of being welcoming, even while every new wave of immigrants had to fight, sometimes quite literally, little street by street, against the last wave for a piece of the promised land. Like all myths, that one was a lie that revealed the truth. America was a promised land for the huddled masses to roam free, but only if they could fend off the other tribes by punching them down endlessly. A promised land is like a Garden of Eden, but who can live in the garden peacefully but angels? Human beings, flawed, indelicate things, are only meant to be cast out. They are ever in conflict, in tension, hungry and ravenous. And that is never truer than for their most despised, who need to be healed most, or else will ravage the garden's worst. In this way, a garden given to the despised is a war waiting to happen, a war against itself. America is at just such a war and has always been. The name of this war is cruelty, but the end of this war is not victory, but collapse. I don't say any of this to blame, shame, or judge, but only so that perhaps the history of violence can at last be reckoned with. I think you'll agree, quite powerful stuff. And it's always something that's fascinated me, as I say, about America, the number of shootings, homicides per year. When you realize that north of the border over in Canada, they don't have these problems. Shootings are, they try and explain shootings away as being, computer games or goth music or all sorts of things, In actual fact, I think Umar is quite correct. It's history, it's historical. And we've seen the kind of cruelty inflicted on the lower class by these Netflix documentaries, particularly, as I say, Making a Murderer, where, in rural Wisconsin, you can't have more lower class than the Averys that live in trailers on a scrapyard, and being picked on by the sheriff department. There's one other thing I wanted to share with you as well. Another dreadful case. Excuse me. That we heard about out of Boston was that of Sean Ellis in the documentary Trial Number 4. And Sean's excellent lawyer, excuse me, Rosemary Scapicchio, she's not been twiddling her thumbs since Trial Number 4 came out. So I've got something else I wanted to share with you. So let me put it onto the right one. Yeah, there we go. And what I'll do is, because there's a video in this, which is well worth watching, I will leave the link in the description below rather than actually playing the video now. But this is the law offices of Rosemary Scapicchio, who obviously many of us, she is held in the high esteem, along with like Kathleen Zellner, Luke Ryan, and a few of the others, the Vic Fazels. Aggressive Boston criminal defense attorney. You wouldn't want to get on the wrong side of Rosemary, would you? Eh? Breaking news. Attorney Scapicchio takes on eBay. Attorney Rosemary Scapicchio filed a lawsuit against eBay and others on behalf of David and Ina Steiner, Natick journalists behind the trade publication E-Commerce Bites. The suit, and I'll leave the link to the PDF document of the suit. Well, it's actually there. There you go. There is the PDF of it, and here is the video to have a look at. But just to briefly finish off, the suit alleges eBay, its former CEO, former chief communications officer, and others engaged in a conspiracy to intimidate, threaten to kill, torture, terrorize, stalk, and silence the Steiners through a barrage of around-the-clock cyber stalking, ominous death threats, and deliveries and in-person surveillance that caused the Steiners to fear for their lives. These big corporations, well, they reflect, don't they, badly on where they're from. So I'm going to carry on with the next part soon of that, looking at the excellent Reddit post by Temptedious. And I would also point out that at 11 o'clock last night, Foul Play had Temptedious live with them, talking about his excellent document. Why is it excellent? Well, none other than Kathleen Zellner tweeted it. So, obviously she's in full support of the Reddit post. So check out Foul Play's video. I'll see if I can find the link for it. And as I say, I'll put the link to the Rosemary Scapicchio law office, where you'll get the link both to the video and to the document. It's of a funny feeling it's just under 100 pages that she's filed in this civil suit against eBay. But the press conference that she gives alongside David and Ina Steiner will give you a a good knowledge of the case. So as I say, fair play to Rosemary. She hasn't been sat twiddling her thumbs since trial number 4. As usual, leave your well thought out and coherent comments below. Abusive ones, as always, will be deleted. But please let us know what you think about this. You know, when we saw Making a Murderer, and we saw the way that, you know, well, not just Stephen Avery, Brendan Dassey being treated, but, you know, the cruelty inflicted on the Avery family, particularly Ma and Pa. I think Umar has got it pretty much right. You know, you don't have to go by, as I say, by the number of documentaries that we've now seen that deal with the way certain members of society are treated. Okay, I'm going to shut up and leave it there, and hopefully get this next second part of the Mr. Avery will spend the rest of his life in prison video dealt with shortly. Catch you all soon. Bye for now.